Hey guys, tonight we ease into something ancient, quiet, and strangely comforting. You stand in the dim glow of an oil lamp, its flame wobbling like it's trying to whisper a secret across 3,000 years. The air around you carries that warm, earthy scent of old palm leaf manuscripts, and somewhere far off, a chorus of night insects gives the whole place a soft, steady rhythm. You're stepping straight into the earliest stirrings of Vedic mathematics, long before anyone bothered to name it, when ideas weren't written down, they were breathed, sung, and remembered. And yes, you probably won't survive this world unless you're really good at sitting cross-legged for hours without complaining. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and the local time too, I love seeing where you're drifting off from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step onto a cool stone floor as the night settles heavier, and the world around you shrinks to the gentle flicker of that lamp. The early Vedic world hums with hymns, Rsi, Saman, and Yajas, and buried inside their melody are small seeds of mathematics. A mainstream fact historians love pointing out is that the Vedas contain subtle numerical structures, meters based on fixed syllable counts, patterns repeating like woven threads, and rhythms that act almost like living spreadsheets. Historians still argue whether the composers intentionally encoded mathematical rules, or whether those patterns emerged accidentally from poetic cadence. Either way, you feel the symmetry as you breathe, like your mind is being nudged into alignment. A quirky detail drifts your way, some early reciters supposedly trained by chanting while standing in a river, letting the current reset their focus whenever they lost count. You imagine yourself doing that, mess up a syllable and the water politely tugs your ankles, like nature offering a gentle slap on the wrist. Nearby, a fire crackles. Someone traces simple geometric ideas into the dust, triangles, squares, and little marks that feel more like gestures than diagrams. You watch them, realizing that to these people, math isn't a school subject, it's a breathing companion to ritual, a way to anchor the cosmos so it doesn't wobble out of tune. As you settle into the quiet, you feel the story pulling you deeper. The night stretches, slow and warm, and the first threads of Vedic mathematics begin to weave themselves around your thoughts, soft, steady, and endlessly patient. You wander deeper along the forest path until you reach a small flat patch of earth where moonlight spills in like a soft silver blanket. A young apprentice sits there, drawing lines in the soil with a twig. You settle beside them, the earth cool under your palms, and watch as they sketch a simple square, then a gentle curve, then a few angled strokes. The movements are slow, unhurried, almost sleepy, and you begin to sense why Vedic mathematics has a reputation for feeling less like working out a problem and more like gliding through one. The apprentice murmurs a short chant, barely a breath, and suddenly begins computing what looks like a square root, breaking the shape into smaller imagined pieces. A mainstream fact clicks into place. The Vedic tradition includes methods for extracting square roots with astonishing speed, often reducing the process to elegant mental steps rather than long written calculations. Historians still argue whether these quick methods originated directly in ritual geometry or emerged later as scholars formalized techniques whispered across generations. But right now, in the soft moonlight, it feels as if the method simply rises out of the earth itself. The apprentice taps the ground twice, draws another set of lines, and repeats the chant. You squint. They've just approximated a square root in under 10 seconds. You, in comparison, still traumatized by high school math, feel spiritually attacked, but in a gentle, ASMR-approved way. A quiet, quirky detail drifts across your mind. Some early practitioners supposedly practiced mental arithmetic while listening to the dripping of water from a clay pot, timing each computational step to each drop. The sound kept their pace slow, steady, and meditative, like turning math into a water clock for the brain. You imagine trying that now and accidentally zoning out after 2 drops. The apprentice erases the drawing with one sweep of the hand, then looks at you as if inviting you to try. So you do. You trace a square, break it mentally into manageable segments, and whisper the procedure the way they do, soft, rhythmic, letting the logic fall into place like sand sliding into a bowl. You feel the strange satisfaction of the answer arriving without strain, almost like the calculation solves itself while your mind drifts lazily around it. A breeze lifts the edge of your robe. When did you get a robe? And the trees sway just enough to create a slow, leafy hush. You stay there, practicing root extractions under the moon, the world around you dim and warm, the air heavy with the scent of night flowers. Each calculation feels quieter than the last, more like a pulse than a task, and the deeper you go, the gentler the whole experience becomes. By the time you stand, the apprentice is already gone, vanished into the woods like a half-remembered idea, and you continue forward, your steps light, your mind just a little bit more in tune with the strange, sleepy elegance of Vedic mathematics. You move along the dim path until a soft hum guides you toward a small hut woven from reeds and moon-bleached wood. The door hangs open, swaying gently, as if inviting you to step inside. The moment you cross the threshold, the air shifts, cooler, stiller, almost padded, as though the walls were built to cradle sound instead of reflecting it. In the center sits an elder scholar, back perfectly straight, fingers resting lightly on a palm leaf manuscript. But instead of reading, he's whispering short, clipped lines, tiny sutras, compact and delicate, each one no longer than a breath. You settle onto a woven mat, feeling its fibers press softly into your palms. The elder turns toward you without really turning, more like he becomes aware of you, and he recites a sutra again, slow and steady. A mainstream historical fact unfolds. Many Vedic mathematical techniques are built on sutras, short aphorisms designed to condense entire computational methods into a single phrase. They function almost like mental macros. Once you understand the logic behind a sutra, the entire procedure unfolds effortlessly in your mind. Historians still argue whether these sutras were originally meant for mathematics or whether later scholars retrofitted them as clever mnemonic devices. Either way, the elder makes them feel like ancient software patches whispered straight into your thoughts. He gestures for you to repeat one. The words glide off your tongue awkwardly at first, but then they settle into a rhythm that feels weirdly natural. You repeat it again, and something subtle clicks. The sutra isn't telling you the answer, it's telling you how to think. The structure of the line nudges your mind into a pattern where addition, subtraction, or factorization unfurls on its own. It's like being taught how to dance by being handed a melody instead of steps. A quirky tidbit drifts into your awareness as the elder taps the manuscript's edge. Some students supposedly practice sutras by whispering them to cows at dawn, believing the steady, warm presence of the animals helped regulate breath and cadence. You picture yourself trying that today in a confused cow staring back, silently judging your pronunciation. The elder lifts a palm, signaling you to try a basic computation. You close your eyes, breathe in the calm of the hut, and recite the sutra once more. The steps arrange themselves gently, like placing stones in shallow water. The answer comes quietly, without strain, more of a settling feeling than a solution. The elder nods, satisfied. The hut feels even softer now, like it's holding your success with the gentleness of a lullaby. When you finally rise, the world seems slower, smoother, guided by the subtle pull of those tiny mathematical whispers. You step back outside, carrying the sutras with you like warm pockets of calm tucked into your mind. You drift down a slope where the forest thins out and the ground becomes wide and open, like a natural courtyard laid out just for you. The soil here is warm from the day's leftover sunlight, and when you kneel, your fingertips sink into it with a softness that feels strangely grounding. A few students sit in a loose circle, tracing shapes and numbers directly onto the earth. No parchment, no ink, just dust, breath, and patience. You join him, drawing a faint line with your index finger, and immediately feel the quiet satisfaction of using the world itself as your chalkboard. A mainstream fact settles into your thoughts. Early Vedic learning often relied on earth-based writing, where sand or soil became an ephemeral workspace for arithmetic, geometry, and ritual diagrams. It wasn't just practical, it trained the mind to focus on process rather than permanence. Historians still argue whether this practice began purely out of necessity or whether its meditative nature was intentional, built into the philosophy of thinking lightly and letting go. You drag your fingertip through the sand again, this time carving out a small grid. A student beside you draws a simple equation, then wipes it away instantly with the side of their hand, not out of carelessness, but to remind themselves that clarity shouldn't cling too tightly. There's a kind of soothing humility in knowing the earth will reclaim every calculation within seconds, leaving your mind free instead of cluttered. A quirky detail slips into place like a pebble settling in water. Some teachers supposedly encouraged students to do arithmetic at dawn when the sand was perfectly cooperative, firm enough to hold a line, soft enough to erase without effort. They even joked that if your lines looked crooked, you shouldn't blame your math, just blame the morning dew. You start practicing simple operations, dragging your fingers slowly, feeling each number as a texture rather than a symbol. Addition becomes a merging of lines, subtraction, a brushing away. Even multiplication feels gentler when it's drawn in soft arcs instead of scribbled on paper. Your mind relaxes into the process, the way a cat needs a blanket without thinking of anything except the rhythm. As you work, the breeze carries faint whiffs of incense from somewhere farther in the forest. The combination, the warm soil, the slow movements, the gentle scraping sound, lulls you into a mental state where each calculation feels like a small exhale. The ground doesn't judge your mistakes, it just accepts them, smooths them out, and invites you to try again. You realize how deeply this shapes the Vedic approach. Math isn't something you conquer. It's something you sit beside, patiently, until it reveals itself. When you finally rise, brushing the sandy dust from your hands, the grid you drew fades back into the earth, leaving nothing but a faint warmth on your fingertips and the lingering sense that thinking can be soft, softer than you ever expected. You wander toward a shaded platform made of smooth stone, its surface cool under your feet, as if it's been waiting all day for the sun to finally leave it alone. A small group of students sits in a semicircle around an elder holding a palm leaf strip. But instead of equations, the strip contains gentle metaphors, little comparisons that sound more like poetry than arithmetic. You ease into a spot at the edge, letting your body soften as the elder begins to speak in a slow, steady cadence. A mainstream fact floats into place. Vedic traditions often expressed fractions and ratios through imagery, not rigid symbols. Instead of saying 1/4, a teacher might describe it as a quarter of the moon's bright face, or the part of a fruit that satisfies but doesn't weigh you down. Historians still argue whether these metaphors were mnemonic tools or philosophical choices meant to tie mathematical thought to the natural rhythms of living. Either way, you feel the shift. Numbers become gentler when wrapped in imagery. The elder draws a faint arc in the dust, then places a small pebble at one point along it. A piece of the whole, he whispers, like the slice of a chant missing from your breath. The students nod quietly, absorbing the logic, but also the softness embedded inside it. You realize you're learning a fraction without ever thinking of a numerator or denominator. A quirky tidbit drifts into your awareness. Some Vedic teachers supposedly describe difficult ratios using food analogies, like, if the rice in the pot is the world, then your portion is the shadow the ladle casts. It doesn't help you calculate anything immediately, but it does make you weirdly hungry. You practice tracing your own fraction, using a fallen leaf as the whole. You slide your nail gently across it, dividing it into 4 soft segments. The movement is slow, almost meditative, and the leaf gives just enough resistance to make the lines feel intentional. When you lift it up to the light, the veins glow faintly, turning your improvised diagram into something organic and calming. You sense why this method existed. It keeps your mind tethered to something tactile, something you can breathe with. You whisper your own metaphor as you test another fraction. Half, like the day divided between sun and shade. It feels natural, maybe even soothing, to think this way. Instead of wrestling with symbols, you drift with comparisons that settle easily into your thoughts. Around you, the students share soft murmurs, trading metaphors the way children trade small treasures. A breeze moves through the stone platform, brushing the back of your neck, carrying a hint of sandalwood smoke. The elder watches you with a peaceful approval, as if you've just unlocked a new way of seeing, not just calculating. By the time you rise, every fraction feels like it belongs to the world around you, woven into leaves, moonlight, breath, and quiet. And without noticing, your mind has slipped deeper into the slow, velvety flow of Vedic mathematics, where even the smallest number has room to sigh. You follow a thin trail until it opens into a clearing shaped almost too neatly, as if someone gently persuaded the forest to step aside. At the center lies a ritual altar, low and wide, its edges marked by stones rubbed smooth from generations of hands. You step closer, feeling the temperature shift, warm air rising from the ground where countless fires once burned, cool air settling from the trees above like a slow exhale. A pair of priests move silently around the altar, measuring distances with nothing but strings, sticks, and the softness of their footsteps. A mainstream fact stirs. Vedic ritual required precise geometry, especially for constructing altars whose shapes, square, falcon-shaped, circular, held symbolic meaning. The oldest texts describe exact measurements for each part, linking mathematical proportions to cosmic harmony. Historians still argue whether these geometric rules predated the rituals or emerged because priests needed reliable ways to recreate the sacred designs year after year. But standing here, watching them measure the world with such care, you feel like the math and the ritual grew together like intertwined roots. One priest kneels and places a long reed along the altar's edge, then ties a piece of cord to its end. He stretches the cord slowly, using his free hand to align tiny pebbles that form the boundary of a perfect right angle. No protractors, no metal tools, just touch, breath, and unwavering intention. You realize that every measurement is an act of listening, not calculating. The space itself tells them when the lines are true. A quirky tidbit curls into your thoughts. Some traditions claim that if an altar's geometry was even slightly off, the cosmic guests invited to the ritual might wander in confused, politely, you assume, but still confused. Priests joked that it was like hosting a dinner party where your address was one digit wrong. You kneel beside the altar, tracing its outline with your fingertips. The texture of the stones is cool and reassuring, grounding your attention. One priest hands you a thin stick and guides your hand to draw a soft diagonal across a square. You feel the line settle perfectly between corners, as if it knew where to go before you touched the ground. The diagonal glows faintly in the low light, not visually but conceptually, like you're sensing the logic beneath the ritual surface. Your breath slows. The forest quiets. Even the insects seem to hum at a respectful distance. You're no longer just observing geometry, you're inhabiting it, letting each proportion seep into your awareness like warm water. Shapes stop being diagrams and start becoming part of how you occupy the space, wide, grounded, and gently balanced. When you step back, the altar looks less like a constructed object and more like a sleeping animal curled into its perfect form. You leave the clearing with that image tucked softly into your mind, carrying the sense that geometry isn't a set of instructions, it's a way the world whispers to itself. You step away from the altar and follow a narrow line of flat stones that leads toward a quieter, more open patch of forest. Here the world feels unreasonably calm, like someone pressed a slow-motion button on reality just for your benefit. A lone student stands in the center of the clearing, drawing long, deliberate strokes in the sand with a straight stick. You watch them create a crisp line, then a second one, crossing it at just the right place. The movements are steady, unhurried, almost hypnotic. A mainstream fact surfaces gently. Vedic mathematical practice included simple, elegant techniques for constructing straight lines and diagonals using nothing more than chords and sightlines. Some of these methods resemble early forms of geometric principles later found in classical Indian texts. Historians still argue whether these rules were formalized during the ritual age or whether they were already circulating as practical building knowledge adapted for spiritual purposes. Either way, the results look surprisingly precise for a world without rulers or metal tools. The student gestures for you to join. You kneel beside them, the dust cool and soft under your hands. They place the end of a cord into your palm and guide you to stretch it gently until it's taut, not tight, not slack, just a calm, steady tension. With that single line of tension, you drag your stick through the soil, feeling the cord guide you like a quiet partner. The resulting line is unexpectedly clean, smooth enough to make you feel like you cheated somehow. A quirky tidbit drifts into your mind. Some ancient teachers liked to test straight line skills at dusk because the fading light exaggerated wobbles. If your line looked crooked in that half-lit haze, they said it would definitely look crooked to the gods. It was their version of turning on dark mode for geometry. You try a diagonal next, stretching the cord between two uneven points, letting the student's hand settle lightly against yours until the angle feels balanced, as though the air itself approves. When you draw the line, it slices across the ground in a way that feels softer than it should, like scoring into flour instead of soil. The precision surprises you, not because it's perfect, but because it feels effortless, like your body already knew what straightness felt like before your mind caught up. Around you, the clearing holds a delicate stillness. Leaves barely rustle, the soil carries the day's warmth up into your knees, and the world seems perfectly happy to let you focus on one gentle stroke at a time. Straight lines, diagonals, nothing sharp or tense about them here. They simply appear, guided by intention rather than force. When you finally step back, your intersecting lines form a quiet, geometric sketch, a small, grounded reminder that even the simplest shapes can feel like acts of calm. You rise with a slower breath, carrying the sense that clarity doesn't always come from precision tools, sometimes it comes from the softness of your hand. You wander toward a deeper part of the forest where the light grows amber and the air hums with a kind of softness that feels almost musical. At first you think it's insects or the wind, but as you step closer, the sound resolves into a slow, steady drumming, a single hand tapping a high drum in a pattern so gentle it could lull a stone to sleep. A small circle of students sits around the drummer, eyes half-lidded, bodies swaying in a rhythm that is less dance and more heartbeat. You take a seat among them, letting the vibrations settle into your chest. A mainstream fact drifts in. Some Vedic traditions used rhythmic beats, from drums, clapping patterns, or even the tapping of wooden blocks, to help students internalize numerical sequences and meter lengths. The repetition made long strings of numbers easier to memorize, turning arithmetic into something closer to music. Historians still argue whether this practice evolved from ritual chanting or whether it was a purely educational technique later woven into spiritual training. But sitting here, you feel how naturally numbers slide into rhythm. The drummer shifts to a pattern of 3 slow beats followed by 2 quick taps. A student beside you whispers a sequence under their breath, matching each beat with a number. You try it too, and the sequence falls into place before you even understand why. The beat holds your mind like soft hands, guiding it without pressure. A quirky tidbit trickles into the moment. Some teachers believed you could diagnose a student's mathematical temperament by how they adjusted to a changing rhythm. If they could stay calm when the tempo shifted, they could handle complex calculations. Otherwise, well, they were gently encouraged to pursue poetry instead. You briefly wonder which category you'd fall into, but the drum keeps you from overthinking it. The pattern changes again. This time the beat mimics a water droplet sliding off a leaf, slow, heavier, then a soft echo. You're surprised to find yourself reciting a multiplication pattern in your head without effort. The rhythm smooths out every rough edge of the calculation, making each step feel like a stone placed neatly in a path. As the session continues, the students close their eyes and sway, letting their breath match the pulse. You join in, your movements almost imperceptible, your mind loosening around the numbers until they feel less like facts and more like ripples. Even when the beat momentarily stutters, whether by intention or accident, you feel your brain glide over the disruption, smoothing it out like a hand calming a wrinkle in fabric. When the drummer finally stops, the forest holds the silence like a warm blanket. You feel the last vibrations echo in your ribs, fading slowly but leaving behind a strange clarity, gentler than concentration, deeper than relaxation. You rise slowly, carrying the rhythm with you as you step away, as if the numbers have curled themselves into a quiet lullaby inside your thoughts. You follow the echo of the fading drumbeat until the forest opens into a circular space bathed in pale moonlight. In the center sits a broad stone slab, its surface polished smooth by centuries of hands, rituals, and quiet thinking. A few students are gathered around it, placing pebbles, drawing gentle arcs, and stepping back to observe the shapes forming and dissolving. You move closer, noticing a large circle traced in dust, its edge measured not with metal tools but with steps so even they might as well be part of a meditation. A mainstream fact drifts into place. Early Indian mathematicians had surprisingly clever ways of estimating pi, long before formal proofs or symbolic notation existed. Some approximations were tied to altar building rules, others to practical geometry for ritual spaces, and still others woven into storytelling traditions involving circles and cycles. Historians still argue whether these approximations emerged from pure curiosity or from the need to design circular altars with reliable dimensions. Whatever the case, the circle before you feels less like a diagram and more like a doorway into that ancient curiosity. A teacher steps forward, barefoot, serene, and carrying a long reed. They place one end at the center of the circle, then walk the perimeter in slow, measured strides. Their movement is almost theatrical, but in a sleepy, ASMR-friendly way, each step a soft whisper against the soil. You realize they're counting the length of the circle using their own body as a tool, demonstrating a method older than writing. The idea isn't to be mathematically perfect, it's to feel the ratio in your bones. A quirky tidbit floats into your thoughts. Some practitioners like to use lotus petals placed around a circle to estimate its circumference, joking that, if the lotus stays balanced, so will the math. You imagine an ancient mathematician gently adjusting a petal every time the breeze misbehaved. The teacher hands you the reed, nodding for you to try. You plant the reed at the center and walk slowly around the circle. Your steps aren't as smooth as theirs. You wobble once, catching yourself before you turn the ancient ritual into slapstick, but the rhythm eventually settles. The forest watches silently, the air warm against your skin, the moonlight turning every grain of dust into a tiny spark. When you finish, the teacher shows how the stepped-out measurement compares to the diameter you traced earlier. The ratio is close, surprisingly close, especially for something done in near silence with nothing but a reed and patience. And as you look down at the circle, you feel a soft understanding settle in. Pi isn't just a number here. It's a relationship you experience with your body, the world, and the quiet geometry beneath your feet. The circle fades as a breeze sweeps across the slab, softening its edges. You breathe out slowly, letting the idea drift with the dust. Then you turn, stepping back into the forest's embrace, carrying that gentle, round calm with you. You walk deeper into the night until the trees part just enough to reveal a small clearing dotted with flat stones arranged in spirals. Each stone has markings, tiny, deliberate scratches, that seem random at first, until you realize they're meant to represent truly enormous numbers. Not thousands, not millions, numbers so large they feel like someone tried to count the stars and then got a little carried away. You move between the stones slowly, your fingers brushing their edges, feeling the quiet ambition carved into them. A mainstream fact settles beside you. Ancient Indian traditions, including the Vedic worldview, often used extraordinarily large numbers to describe cosmic cycles. Terms like laksha, 100,000, and koti, 10 million, were common, and some texts expanded into numbers that stretched the imagination into the billions and beyond. Historians still argue whether these numbers represented actual mathematical understanding or metaphorical attempts to express the vastness of time and space. But here, surrounded by stones marked with spirals and scratches, you can feel how naturally they slip between the two worlds. A young scholar is seated at the center of the spiral, arranging small seeds into clusters. Each cluster represents a place value, units, hundreds, 10,000s, then leaping into huge scales where your brain politely checks out for a moment. They gesture for you to sit beside them, and you do, letting the cool stone press lightly into your legs. A quirky tidbit slides gently into your awareness. Some teachers like to compare massive numbers to piles of sesame seeds, insisting that, if you can imagine the smell, you can imagine the scale. It's a surprisingly practical approach, though slightly disappointing if you were hoping to avoid thinking about fragrant, unwieldy math. The scholar nudges a seed toward you, encouraging you to contribute to the pattern. You place it carefully on the stone, watching it join the spiral of magnitudes. As you add more seeds, the scale grows beyond what feels sensible, until all the numbers blur into a gentle abstraction. Instead of wrestling with quantity, you start feeling the rhythm of expansion, the way each place quietly multiplies the last. It's soothing, like watching ripples widen across still water. The moon glows through a thin veil of branches, illuminating the spiral in silver. The seeds sparkle faintly, not from light but from pattern, an order that feels older than language. You sense how ancient thinkers used size not for calculation, but for contemplation. Large numbers became a way to breathe with the universe, to stretch the mind without snapping it. You lean back on your palms, letting the night wash over you. The spiral blows softly, the air hums with a warm stillness, and you feel a strange comfort in the sheer absurdity of counting beyond human reach. Here, in this quiet space, big numbers don't overwhelm, they lull you into vast, drifting calm. You leave the spiral of stones behind and follow a narrow passage between two leaning trees until the forest opens into a soft, moonlit terrace. The air here feels different, lighter, almost expectant, like the world is quietly ticking through a rhythm too slow for ordinary days. A group of monks sits on woven mats arranged in a ring, each one holding a small wooden marker carved with symbols of the solar and lunar cycles. You take your place among them, the mat warm and slightly scratchy beneath your fingertips. A mainstream fact drifts in. Early Indian traditions developed remarkably sophisticated luni-solar calendars, blending the movements of the sun and moon to track seasons, ceremonial days, and long cycles of time. These systems required careful observation, shadow lengths, rising times, phases of the moon, and a good deal of arithmetic to reconcile the mismatch between lunar months and solar years. Historians still argue whether the earliest calendar rules came from priestly needs for ritual timing or from practical agricultural demands. Either way, you can feel the quiet precision as the monks begin the demonstration. One monk lifts a polished bowl of water, tilting it so the moon's reflection dances across its surface. Another adjusts a small stick in the ground, marking the direction of a faint shadow. They aren't rushing, they're syncing themselves with a pace set by the sky, not by clocks. You sense that this is the essence of the Vedic approach. Time is observed, not forced. A quirky tidbit drifts your way. Some teachers insisted that to understand the lunar cycle fully, students had to spend an entire night lying on their backs, staring at the moon, to let the mind stop pretending it's faster than the heavens. You imagine trying that now and falling asleep within 5 minutes. A monk hands you a small wooden disc etched with concentric circles. You turn it slowly, feeling the grooves under your thumb. Each ring represents a repeating cycle: new moon, waxing, full, waning. As you slide your finger along the lines, the rhythm settles into your breath. You're not calculating phases, you're absorbing them, letting the shape of time curve softly inside your thoughts. The monks begin humming, a low, steady tone. It resonates in your chest, syncing with the gentle shift of moonlight on the water bowl. One monk traces the arc of the moon's imagined path in the air, and you follow it with your gaze, feeling how naturally math slips into this ritual, how numbers describe not abstractions but the slow turning of everything. As you sit in this quiet circle, it becomes impossible to tell where the calendar ends and the night begins. Time stretches and softens, losing its edges. You inhale deeply, letting the cool air fill you with the sense that each moment is nested inside another, like cycles within cycles, gentle and infinite. When you finally rise, the moon seems brighter, closer, as if acknowledging your small step into its ancient arithmetic. You walk on, carrying that lunar softness in your chest. You follow the terrace's gentle slope until you reach a small pavilion made of bamboo poles and woven leaves. Soft yellow light leaks through the gaps, flickering like a shy firefly. Inside, a handful of students sit around a low wooden table covered in pebbles, twigs, and little clay markers shaped like crescent moons. A teacher waits at the center, palms resting calmly on their knees. You take a seat among the group, the woven mat sighing quietly beneath you. A mainstream fact settles into your mind. Vedic scholars used algorithmic methods, passed down orally, to determine the precise dates of rituals, festivals, and celestial observances. These calculations required aligning lunar months with solar cycles, estimating intercalary months, and predicting seasonal shifts. Historians still argue whether these early algorithms were formal mathematical systems or practical hacks refined over centuries of observation. But here, the distinction feels irrelevant. Everything unfolds with a gentle, meditative logic. The teacher nudges a pebble into the center of the table. This, they whisper, is the marker for the first bright night. A twig is placed beside it to show the sun's path. Clay crescents represent the moon's shifting phases. Nothing is complex, yet every motion feels deliberate, like choreography for the celestial stage. You watch as the students add and remove pebbles, counting softly under their breath, adjusting the layout whenever the rhythm of the moon demands it. A quirky tidbit floats in. Some traditions taught students to memorize festival dates by listening to the timing of bird calls at dawn during certain months, joking that, if the birds arrive early, the gods must be planning something. You imagine a classroom full of scholars staring at trees, waiting for a confused sparrow to deliver the syllabus. The teacher guides your hand toward a clay crescent. You place it gently beside a pebble, forming a small configuration that represents the coming fortnight. The moment you let it go, something clicks in your mind, not as a calculation, but as an intuitive alignment. You realize that the logic of these rituals isn't rigid, it flows like water finding its path. The group continues adjusting pieces in soft, unhurried motions until the arrangement on the table matches the expected date. You can almost feel the math happening, not loud or flashy, but in a way that encourages your breath to slow and your shoulders to loosen. Each pebble is a tiny pause, each crescent a gentle turn of the mind. When the teacher finally nods in approval, the night seems to brighten by a shade, as if the forest has acknowledged your new familiarity with its rhythms. You step out of the pavilion with a quiet understanding. Ritual timekeeping isn't about precision for its own sake. It's about syncing your awareness with the sky, one calm gesture at a time. You walk slowly down a crooked little path where fireflies drift like lazy sparks, blinking in uneven rhythms that somehow match your breathing. The forest opens into a quiet grove dotted with flat stones arranged in a loose circle. A few students sit here with palm leaf strips, each one etched with short chants, mantras, that the teacher explains can double as simple combinatorial patterns. You settle beside them, the stone pleasantly cool beneath your legs, and let the night wrap itself around you like a soft shawl. A mainstream fact drifts through your thoughts. Certain Vedic verses contain implicit combinatorial structures, where syllables, patterns, and repetitions encode ways of arranging or rearranging elements. Some scholars point out that these patterns resemble early forms of permutations or combinations. Historians still argue whether these embedded structures were intentionally mathematical or simply poetic arrangements that mathematicians interpreted later. Listening now, you can feel how both ideas might be true. The teacher begins humming a mantra with a gentle rise and fall pattern. Each shift in tone signals a rearrangement of the elements within the chant. You realize that the mantra is acting like a map for counting possibilities. Changing one syllable changes the arrangement, changing the arrangement changes the meaning. It's math hiding in melody. A quirky tidbit lands softly in your mind. Some teachers used flower petals to teach combinations, scattering them into patterns and joking, if petals fall in the right places, the universe approves your math. Considering how easily petals drift in the breeze, this probably led to a lot of cosmic disapproval. You're given a small bowl filled with pale blossoms and asked to create your own arrangement. You scatter the petals onto the stone, watching them land in a pattern that feels accidental at first, then strangely intentional. The teacher hums the mantra again, guiding you to shift one petal here, one petal there, until the arrangement matches the rhythm. Each tiny adjustment feels like flipping a switch in your brain, aligning the petals with the pulse of the chant. You feel your thoughts smoothing out, matching the soft cadence around you. The students begin tracing small diagrams in the dust, triangles, arcs, gentle grids, each one echoing the different ways the petals can be arranged. You copy their motions, letting your fingertip glide across the ground. There's no pressure to understand every nuance, the patterns themselves do most of the thinking. As the mantra grows softer, the petals settle into a final configuration that looks almost like a star resting on the stone. The teacher nods, pleased, then leans back to gaze at the treetops swaying in slow motion above the grove. You follow the gaze, feeling the same looseness drifting through your chest. When you stand, the petals remain scattered in their quiet pattern, glowing faintly in the moonlight. It occurs to you that combinations aren't just numbers, they're moments, arrangements of small, gentle choices. You carry that softness with you as you step back into the forest's embrace. You move along a narrow trail where the ground softens under your feet, cushioned by fallen leaves that hush your steps. Ahead, a faint glow flickers through the trees, warm, amber, and steady. You push aside a hanging curtain of vines and find a lone scholar sitting beside a low stone table. Spread across it are small wooden tablets etched with cryptic marks, symbols that look like numbers but also like tiny constellations sketched by someone who enjoyed being mysterious. You sit opposite the scholar, the stone pleasantly cool as you rest your hands on it. A mainstream fact settles into your awareness. Vedic traditions reference certain mathematical constants, ratios, repeating patterns, proportional rules, that appear across texts and practices. Some relate to altar geometry, some to meter formulas, and others to astronomical cycles. Historians still argue whether these constants were explicitly recognized as universal values or simply appeared through repeated practical use. Either way, their consistency suggests the early mathematicians were quietly tracking something deeper than day-to-day calculations. The scholar slides one of the tablets toward you. Its markings form a pattern that hints at a geometric ratio used for squaring altars of irregular shapes. You trace the grooves with your fingertips, feeling how each line carries an echo of intention. The scholar taps twice, urging you to notice a particular pair of marks, an ancient shorthand for a proportional rule. It's faint, almost coy, as if the number it represents prefers subtle entrances. A quirky tidbit drifts into your thoughts. Some manuscripts reportedly included mischievous constants, values intentionally written slightly wrong to test whether students were truly paying attention. If you copied the error without noticing, your teacher would gently remark that the universe appreciates a skeptical mind. You imagine failing that test and the universe shrugging at you with mild disappointment. The scholar places a tiny clay bead at one end of the tablet and gestures for you to recreate the ratio using two chords. You stretch them out slowly, matching lengths, adjusting tension, breathing in sync with the movements. The ratio forms like a soft click in your mind, a gentle internal alignment rather than a strict calculation. It's less about precision and more about resonance, letting the numbers settle naturally, without force. The bead rolls a little as you work, and you steady it with your fingertip, feeling the small vibration of contact. The scholar watches with quiet approval, and for a moment, the entire forest seems to hold its breath, not in suspense, but in patient companionship. When you finish, the chords form a clean proportional set, their angles resting as effortlessly as a folded blanket. The scholar nods once, then extinguishes the small flame beside the table. The grove dims into a soft, velvety darkness where the constants feel less like abstract ideas and more like sleeping creatures curled into the landscape. You rise slowly, letting the quiet wrap around you. The constants stay with you, not rigid, not loud, but murmuring softly at the edges of your awareness, like distant stars whispering their old, steady truths. You follow a narrow ribbon of pathway where the forest floor grows firm again, dappled with moonlight that flickers through branches like slow-moving waves. Ahead, a cluster of young students sits around a flat stump, their hands moving with uncanny speed. You hear soft murmurs, numbers, tiny breaths, quick rhythms, yet everything feels strangely calm, as if the air itself is padding every sound. You ease into the circle, knees sinking into the moss, and watch as they begin another round of mental arithmetic, their fingers barely twitching in their laps. A mainstream fact settles gently into your thoughts. Vedic mathematics is famous for its mental shortcuts, methods that let you multiply, divide, and simplify in your head using patterns rather than long drills. Some of these techniques were later recorded in texts like the Silva Sutras and other commentaries, while others survived through oral teaching. Historians still argue whether the speed of these mental methods was common practice or the specialty of a trained few, but sitting here, watching the quiet confidence of these students, it feels almost second nature. A teacher leans forward with a serene expression, holding up both hands. They make a simple gesture, 2 fingers, then 3, barely visible in the dim light. Instantly the students start whispering answers, combining and rearranging values in patterns that feel like watching wind move through grass. You try to follow, only to realize your brain still insists on long division like a stubborn mule. A quirky tidbit drifts in. Some teachers reportedly use pestle and mortar rhythms to help train quick calculations. Students would pound herbs while solving arithmetic aloud, forcing their minds to stay steady even as their bodies worked. You imagine grinding spices while trying to compute something complicated and instantly decide you would have been excused from class. The teacher gives you a soft smile and motions for you to try a small exercise. They press a smooth pebble into your palm, warm, round, grounding, and whisper a pattern. You repeat it slowly, feeling the rhythm settle into your breath. Then you try a simple multiplication using one of the mental shortcuts they demonstrated, splitting the number, recombining, smoothing the steps like brushing your hand across water. To your surprise, the answer arrives with less friction than you expected, almost as if the forest itself nudged it into place. A student beside you demonstrates another trick, rapid squaring, by drawing a tiny shape in the dust, then erasing it before you fully catch on, leaving your mind to replay the pattern on its own. The simplicity humbles you. None of this feels rushed or showy. It's quiet, fluid, and oddly soothing. You keep practicing, letting each calculation glide more than grind. The group murmurs gently around you, voices blending with the distant chorus of insects. The teacher occasionally taps the stump with one knuckle, a subtle metronome that keeps everyone rooted in rhythm. You follow a narrow ribbon of pathway where the forest floor grows firm again, dappled with moonlight that flickers through branches like slow-moving waves. Ahead, a cluster of young students sits around a flat stump, their hands moving with uncanny speed. You hear soft murmurs, numbers, tiny breaths, quick rhythms, yet everything feels strangely calm, as if the air itself is padding every sound. You ease into the circle, knees sinking into the moss, and watch as they begin another round of mental arithmetic, their fingers barely twitching in their laps. A mainstream fact settles gently into your thoughts. Vedic mathematics is famous for its mental shortcuts, methods that let you multiply, divide, and simplify in your head using patterns rather than long drills. Some of these techniques were later recorded in texts like the Silva Sutras and other commentaries, while others survived through oral teaching. Historians still argue whether the speed of these mental methods was common practice or the specialty of a trained few, but sitting here, watching the quiet confidence of these students, it feels almost second nature. A teacher leans forward with a serene expression, holding up both hands. They make a simple gesture, 2 fingers, then 3, barely visible in the dim light. Instantly the students start whispering answers, combining and rearranging values in patterns that feel like watching wind move through grass. You try to follow, only to realize your brain still insists on long division like a stubborn mule. A quirky tidbit drifts in. Some teachers reportedly use pestle and mortar rhythms to help train quick calculations. Students would pound herbs while solving arithmetic aloud, forcing their minds to stay steady even as their bodies worked. You imagine grinding spices while trying to compute something complicated and instantly decide you would have been excused from class. The teacher gives you a soft smile and motions for you to try a small exercise. They press a smooth pebble into your palm, warm, round, grounding, and whisper a pattern. You repeat it slowly, feeling the rhythm settle into your breath. Then you try a simple multiplication using one of the mental shortcuts they demonstrated, splitting the number, recombining, smoothing the steps like brushing your hand across water. To your surprise, the answer arrives with less friction than you expected, almost as if the forest itself nudged it into place. A student beside you demonstrates another trick, rapid squaring, by drawing a tiny shape in the dust, then erasing it before you fully catch on, leaving your mind to replay the pattern on its own. The simplicity humbles you. None of this feels rushed or showy. It's quiet, fluid, and oddly soothing. You keep practicing, letting each calculation glide more than grind. The group murmurs gently around you, voices blending with the distant chorus of insects. The teacher occasionally taps the stump with one knuckle, a subtle metronome that keeps everyone rooted in rhythm. By the time you stand, your mind feels lighter, as if the usual strain of arithmetic has melted into something softer, gentler. The techniques linger in your thoughts like soft footprints on sand, quick, quiet, and surprisingly comforting. The teacher gives you a soft smile and motions for you to try a small exercise. They press a smooth pebble into your palm, warm, round, grounding, and whisper a pattern. You repeat it slowly, feeling the rhythm settle into your breath. Then you try a simple multiplication using one of the mental shortcuts they demonstrated, splitting the number, recombining, smoothing the steps like brushing your hand across water. To your surprise, the answer arrives with less friction than you expected, almost as if the forest itself nudged it into place. A student beside you demonstrates another trick, rapid squaring, by drawing a tiny shape in the dust, then erasing it before you fully catch on, leaving your mind to replay the pattern on its own. The simplicity humbles you. None of this feels rushed or showy. It's quiet, fluid, and oddly soothing. You keep practicing, letting each calculation glide more than grind. The group murmurs gently around you, voices blending with the distant chorus of insects. The teacher occasionally taps the stump with one knuckle, a subtle metronome that keeps everyone rooted in rhythm. You walk deeper into the forest until the scent shifts, less earthy, more herbal. The air grows warm and fragrant, carrying hints of turmeric, neem, and something sweet you can't quite name. A small clearing opens before you, lit by bowls of ghee lamps arranged in a gentle spiral. At the center, healers sit cross-legged around trays of powdered roots, leaves, and spices. Their movements are slow and deliberate, each pinch measured with a precision that feels more intuitive than mathematical. You step closer, feeling the warmth of the lamp settle on your skin like a soft shawl. A mainstream fact settles beside you. Within ancient Indian traditions, including Vedic and early Ayurvedic practice, healers relied on proportional calculations to determine dosages of herbs, ratios based on age, body heat, season, and even the lunar day. These weren't casual approximations, they followed structured guidelines embedded in old texts. Historians still argue whether these dosage systems emerged from trial and error medical observation or from older mathematical frameworks adapted to healing. Either way, the blend of calculation and intuition feels seamless here. A healer gestures for you to sit. They slide a wooden tray toward you with 3 small bowls, one of powdered ginger, one of sandalwood paste, and one of crushed leaves. Without a word, they draw a shape in the mixture, a small triangle indicating the base proportions. Then, in a soft whisper, they explain how to scale the mixture depending on the patient's constitution. You sense the math beneath the surface, but also the rhythm, like doubling a recipe while listening to the forest breathe. A quirky tidbit floats into your awareness. Some healers reportedly taught ratios by comparing them to the behavior of cows. If she eats 3 bundles now, she'll want 6 when the rain ends. Not the most rigorous formula, but apparently it worked well enough that students still joke about it. You're handed a small spoon and asked to recreate the proportion. You scoop slowly, adjusting amounts until they align with the healer's gestures. There's no tension in your mind, no rush. Each correction feels gentle, like smoothing a wrinkle from a sheet. You notice how the powders fall differently, one light and fluffy, one dense and sticky. These tiny sensory cues guide your adjustments more than numbers do. Another healer approaches with a clay cup filled with water from a nearby stream. They add your finished mixture in careful intervals, watching how it dissolves. The proportions settle perfectly, not because you calculated flawlessly, but because you moved at the pace the mixture required. The lamps flicker as a soft breeze moves through the clearing, carrying warm herbal scents. You feel a hush fall over the space, a shared understanding that mathematics here isn't about equations, it's about harmony. Ratios become rituals. Measurements become offerings. Every calculation aims for balance, not precision for its own sake. You rise slowly, the scent of herbs clinging gently to your hands. As you leave the clearing, the warm glow of the lamps fades behind you, but the sense of calm proportionality lingers, as if you've imbibed a small dose of the forest's own equilibrium. You return to the forest path, now darker and quieter, as though the trees themselves are settling in for the night. The air feels thick with memory, not your own, but of voices and footsteps that have passed through for centuries. A soft glow appears ahead, not firelight this time, but the muted shimmer of polished stones arranged in a long row. You step closer and realize the stones aren't markers, they're seats. A line of students sits upon them, straight-backed and silent, facing an elder who carries nothing but his voice. A mainstream fact drifts in like a gentle breeze. For much of early Indian learning, especially in Vedic contexts, oral transmission was the core method of preserving knowledge. Entire mathematical procedures, chants, and ritual instructions were passed from teacher to student through recitation, repetition, and refined memory techniques. Historians still argue whether this reliance on memory limited the complexity of the math or sharpened it into something uniquely flexible. Standing here, watching the students' steady attention, the answer feels obvious: they turn memory into an art. The elder begins speaking in a slow, almost hypnotic cadence. Each phrase rolls into the next, forming patterns, some symmetrical, some rhythmic, all deliberately structured. This isn't just storytelling. These are mnemonic sequences, mathematical ideas woven into sound. You sit at the end of the row, and as you close your eyes, you can almost see the patterns forming behind your eyelids, lines, grids, gentle arcs drifting like afterimages. A quirky tidbit floats up. Some students trained their memory by holding a small pebble under their tongue while reciting. The idea was that if the chant could survive that distraction, it was truly learned. You considered trying it but decide the forest has seen enough questionable choices tonight. The elder instructs the students to repeat his words. Their voices rise in soft unison, not loud, not urgent, but steady. You join in, hesitantly at first, then more comfortably as the rhythm carries you. There's something calming about this style of learning. The chant holds you, shaping your breath into gentle arcs that match the structure of the ideas. The math isn't stated outright, but it's there, embedded in the lengths of the syllables, in the pauses, in the way one phrase leads naturally into the next. The elder walks behind the row, placing a hand lightly on each student's shoulder as if transferring a quiet blessing of confidence. When he reaches you, his touch is soft, grounding. In that moment, the chant clicks, not as information, but as something felt. Memory becomes not a task, but a texture. Eventually he signals the group to stop. The forest absorbs the sudden silence, holding it like a folded blanket. You feel strangely fuller, steadier, as if the chant has rooted itself somewhere behind your ribs. The students rise one by one, bowing slightly to the elder before melting into the trees like ripples fading into still water. You stand last, the echo of the recitation lingering in your breath. As you walk on, you sense it following you, not demanding recall, just humming quietly at the edges of your thoughts, gentle as dusk. You walk until the woods thin into a soft, open field touched by the faintest silver of moonlight. The grass sways in long, slow breaths, as if the earth itself is relaxing after a long day of holding up the sky. In the center of the clearing sits a solitary scholar, older than the night around them, tracing calm circles in the dirt with a thin branch. You approach quietly, feeling the gentle tug of the moment, like the story itself wants you to sit down. So you do. A mainstream fact drifts into place. The influence of Vedic mathematical thinking didn't disappear with the ancient chants. Its spirit, patterns, shortcuts, geometric intuition, echoes through later Indian mathematics, from early algebraic treatises to astronomical calculations. Historians still argue whether today's mental math traditions directly descend from Vedic methods or whether they simply share the same conceptual soil. Either way, the continuity feels alive here, humming beneath the cool night air. The scholar smiles without looking up, drawing one more circle in the dust. Everything moves, they whisper, but the ways of thinking remain. They tap the circle gently, letting it distort in the loose earth. Knowledge shifts shape, but its rhythm stays. You watch the line spring back imperfectly, proving the point more softly than words ever could. A quirky tidbit curls through your thoughts. Some modern teachers still reference ancient sutra-style shortcuts, joking that they're older than your ancestors' bedtime stories. It's strange to imagine your late-night cram sessions connected to chants once carried through forests like this one. The scholar hands you the branch. You draw your own circle, wobbly, uneven, but sincere. The dirt is cool under your fingertip as you smooth the line, letting it settle into something calmer. The scholar nods, pleased, as if the point wasn't symmetry but presence. You sit together in companionable silence, each of you adding little patterns, lines, arcs, spirals, to the soft earth as though stitching the story you've traveled through back into the ground. You lean back, feeling the vast quiet settle around you. The forest hums faintly, the wind sighs across tall grass. And the journey through Vedic mathematics, its chants, its rhythms, its geometry, its gentle logic, lingers like a warm ember resting behind your heart. You realize how seamlessly these ancient ideas wove themselves into your steps, guiding you toward a kind of thoughtfulness that feels less like effort, more like breathing. The scholar finally stands and melts into the dark, leaving only faint footprints. You remain in the clearing a moment longer, letting the calm seep all the way through you. Then you rise, carrying the whole soft, ancient cadence within your chest. The forest around you begins to dim, not from darkness but from quiet, a deeper quiet than before, one that smooths itself across the air like a cool cloth placed gently on a tired forehead. Each sound softens at the edges. Leaves murmur more slowly, the breeze draws longer, calmer paths through the grass. Even your own breath starts to lengthen, easing into a rhythm that feels older than anything you've learned tonight. You let your steps become unhurried, almost weightless, as if each one is cushioned by the long memory of the path beneath you. The ideas you've gathered, those soft ratios, whispered sutras, quiet rhythms, gentle geometries, begin to dissolve into a warm blur. Not lost, just settling, like grains of sand drifting to the bottom of a still bowl of water. The moon hangs above you, steady and tender, casting a pale glow that seems to wash everything in a slow, silver hush. Trees sway with the smallest hints of motion, each one stretching toward the sky with the patience of centuries. You pause, letting the night wrap around your shoulders, loose and comforting, as though the forest itself wants you to rest. Your breath drifts in, your breath drifts out. The thoughts in your mind soften until they no longer push or pull, they float, steady and light, like lotus petals on quiet water. The journey has thinned into a pleasant haze, a gentle afterimage that glows faintly behind your closed eyes. You feel the weight in your limbs ease. The air cools just enough to cradle you. The world narrows to softness, to warmth, to the slow steady hum beneath everything. And if sleep begins to rise now, calm and effortless, you can let it. The night will hold the rest.